Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today, I wanted to address I missed the Mobility Monday, and the big reason is that I am actually going to be working Mobility Monday into today's warm up Wednesday. We're going to be going over a exercise specific warm up, the squat again, continuing that. And in terms of the mobility, I'm going to be addressing mobility in the ankles and feet. I did go over a little bit last Friday, but I did want to apologize for missing Monday's mobility video. I did move my mic to a different location to see if it still picks up the sound just as well. If this doesn't work out, I'll move it back to my shirt neck. With that, I'm going to take my shoes off again to show you a little bit of the mobility in the feet. While I'm taking my shoes off, I want to go over kind of the anatomy of the squat. One of the biggest things, like I said on Friday, and excuse me if you can't hear me, I've got a vehicle passing in front of my house right now. So one of the things that I went over on Friday was the platform, our feet being our platform. And so I want you to think of our feet as a tripod where when we're performing the squat, most of our pressure or our pressure points are going to be at the heel, the big toe, and the fifth toe or the pinky toe. And you want to think of it as a triangle where those are the three pressure points. A lot of folks tell you sit back on your heels, and that's not quite the way to perform or execute the exercise, mostly because if you sit back on your heels, you almost feel like you got that falling feeling. This should feel more like you're sitting down and standing up from a chair. But before we get into that, I'm going to go over the feet. So the first thing, as I mentioned on Friday, are the toes. A good way to assess toe flexibility or toe mobility is by performing a 90-degree toe lift or push. And in order to do that, you get your toes underneath your feet, and then you go ahead and sit back on them. You should see a relatively good bend there. If there's any pain, stiffness, or any sharp shooting pain or like a click or a tear, immediately stop and then assess what is going on. And if perhaps maybe there's been a unaddressed injury, that is the time to go see a podiatrist or a doctor, and go through the process of making sure that your feet are okay, making sure that there isn't any injuries, and then please let us know if there is an existing injury. That way we can address that and then change up or modify your exercises so that we're not causing further damage. With that, the toe flexibility is relatively straightforward. It doesn't involve a whole lot of it's not a big requirement during the squat, but it's a requirement in other areas of your life, right? And so you want to always have that flexibility. Again, the way that your body works is it's connected, so everything influences one another. So it's there's a term for it. I'm forgetting it right now. I'm sure it'll pop up in my head. But essentially, if you don't have that flexibility and you're tight in the foot, it's tight in the bridge of your foot, that means that you're going to be tight in your ankle. You're not going to see just as much flexibility in the ankle or mobility in that ankle, which will then affect the knee, which will then affect the hip, and then affect the other leg. And it could even be worse. You'd have shooting pain going up your spine, causing a headache. And that's how quickly we can find ourselves in a world of hurt. And so one of the ways to improve mobility is by continuously stretching those areas. So performing that exercise, one good way to start is by starting off with one foot out in front of the other, and then you're going to lean forward with your toes staying underneath the foot, and then stretch it out, and then come back down, stretch the calf, and then going back up, stretching it out. Another great exercise is grabbing a tennis ball. Let me grab a tennis ball quick. And this is another awesome little exercise that you can perform. Putting the tennis ball on the bridge of your foot and then rolling it out. It's almost like a massage. And for those who have ticklish feet, if you can push through that, it'll improve tenfold your any exercise where you're required to be standing up on your feet. So as you do this, you're massaging out, looking for any pain. And so if there's like a tight pain, that's usually a good indicator that you've got maybe some muscle tissue scarring or a knot. And so again, we're always on our feet, so we're going to cause that to happen quite often. And so in order to improve mobility and flexibility in the foot, this is an outstanding way of doing that. Going for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and then stopping, and then getting back up, performing that stretch, that initial stretch that we just did, and then going back to the tennis ball, back and forth. And then as you're going through it, maybe do it for about 5 minutes, and then assess the flexibility or the mobility in your toes after that, by that push test that I had just shown you, which was getting your toes underneath your feet and then sitting back and then coming back forward. And then the next portion of the mobility area, or the mobility, is the ankle. Now a lot of people think, oh, my ankles are fine. I don't feel any tightness. I don't feel any pain. Usually it's not going to present itself very well. And if it does, it's going to present itself in your knees. Or it'll present itself in ankle fall, which will lead to a knee cave-in. And that was addressed in Friday's squat form check video. So again, when you're performing the squat, go ahead, get your stance. And as you're going down, I want you to think about looking at yourself in the mirror or looking down at your feet. And if you see that your feet fall in or your ankles twist in, that's a good indicator that your ankles are fighting you during that exercise or that specific movement. And a way to do that, and a way to get through improving that, is by doing a similar stretch to the toes. You're just going to stretch out that calf and come back for maybe 10 seconds and then go back out for 30, continuously doing that. Another great way of improving mobility is performing a foam roller exercise. So what you're going to be doing is you get your foot, or your calf, I should say, out in front of you. You can have both together at the same time. Lift yourself up off the ground, and then you're going to roll out till you get as far as you can, or all the way down to your ankles, and then you're going to go back. And you're looking for any pain points. Usually those are going to be indicators of a good indicator of muscle tissue scarring or knots. And I want you to roll through those specific points for about 30 seconds, and then give yourself a break. As you are performing the foam roller exercise, I want you to think about improving the exercise later on by switching to one leg. And that can be done where you lift up off the ground and you're just doing one at a time. So you have one heel on the ground and the other one performing the roll. Or, and this is the most difficult one, is bringing your foot up over in the shape of a number 4, and then you're going to be using that opposite leg to put pressure down on your calf. Now that really hurt right there. So I found a knot, and this is a good example right here. Going for 30 seconds of just pushing through it, fighting that, and improving the ankle mobility later on. So by now you're probably asking, well, what's a good ankle mobility? I did go over that a little bit on Friday. You can get yourself about 5 inches from a wall. I'm going to be using this box right here, this exercise box, and essentially you put your big toe 5 inches from the wall or the box, and then from there you're going to lean into it. And if you cannot touch it, so you see how I'm just about to touch it, I'm maybe a little bit of a finger's width away. That's a good indicator that you need to improve mobility. And as I just said, I found a knot, so I'll be addressing that later tonight. But you want to get about 30 degrees in that shin, or better. And I can even feel the tightness from that knot. Yeah, that kind of covers our mobility section for today. So again, improve the toe mobility and ankle mobility by either performing stretching or foam rolling. I like to do both. If you have maybe a massage gun, that will greatly help too. Yeah, that being said, I am going to go ahead and start phasing into the warm-up. Today we have a exercise-specific warm-up. So what that means is, let's say that I've got leg day. I know I'm going to be performing a squat, or maybe I've got a lunge in my workout, or maybe I'm using the leg press today. So what you're going to do is, after you've completed your generic warm-up, which I went over on Friday, you've already done the bent leg body twist or the windmills, and that's where you sit down, lie on your back, bring your hips to 90 degrees, knees at 90 degrees, and then let your knees fall together to one side, bring them up, pause, fall to the other side, and then come back up. That is a full rep. That should be incorporated in all your warm-ups. It directly addresses any issues going on with the hips. And now that I'm on the hips, that is what we will be focusing on for the warm-up. It's a hip mobility warm-up. That's kind of why it kind of worked out for us to go over mobility today instead of Mobility Monday. So the first exercise is going to be called 90-90. It is where you put yourself with your feet just outside of your hips or shoulders width, and then let yourself recline back on your arms. You're going to let your knees fall together until you get as far as you can. Come back up, and then you're going to the other side, going as far as you can, and then coming back up. That is one rep. The goal is to have that opposite knee, the back knee, touch the ground. As you can see, I can't do that, so I need to improve on getting that knee further down. And I want you to think of your hips as not just one solid bone, but rather it's a multi-joint bone that's got cartilage in different pieces of your hips, right? And so with that hip, all those bones are shifting inside of you. If you're constantly performing an exercise incorrect, or if you're constantly sitting down in an incorrect position, that's always going to be affecting and influencing how you move every day, including your walk and the gait in your walk. So that's the first exercise, is 90-90. The next, oh, I just got a splinter. The next is the ankle lift. So what you're going to do is you'll bring your entire body weight to one side of your hips, almost like 90-90. You'll drop both knees and then lift that back foot off the ground. and then you're setting it back down, lift, and continuing that for approximately 10 to 12 reps. You'll start to feel when your hips are getting really hot, and that's usually a good indicator that you have warmed up that space. Again, for the opposite side, lift, and then back down, lift, and then back down. This is also addressing any mind-muscle connectivity with the glute medius, which is a huge influencer in how your body moves up and down, from side to side, whereas the primary movers such as the quads, the glutes, and the hamstrings are going to be the primary movers of forcing or producing power up. The next exercise is a actual body squat, but before you do that, or while you do that, I want you to grab a small plate, and this is going to continue addressing that ankle mobility. And what you're going to do is get your stance with one foot on the plate, and you're going to go down and then back up, switch, down, and back up. And you're going to perform that exercise for about 5 reps. Lastly, for body weight exercise, you're going to perform a box squat, which you get your stance, you get in position, you go down until your booty touches that box, and then you're coming back up. What I don't want to see is you go like this, where you sit back and then you come back up. No, we're going to go down, touch, back up. Down, touch, back up. And I want those knees to be following your toes in however way they are splayed. During this time, I do want you to address how the exercise is performed. Since this is a squat, think about all that I went through on Friday. So feet shoulder width apart, a slight pivot in your toes, angling outward. Splay your toes and press them down inside of your shoe. If you have a very tight shoe, this might be very difficult. But splay your toes. Think about that tripod that I told you about, putting pressure on that big toe, the fifth toe, the heel, going down, and then back up. And then lastly, you perform the exercise with the weight that you are going to be doing at a much lighter weight. Usually, I have you all doing about 3 to 4 sets. So I want you to think about each set going into it as either a warming set or a working set. The very first set usually is going to be a warm-up set. It's going to be part of your warm-up. So for me, usually I grab the bar. When I grab the bar and I'm warming up, I'm thinking about how I'm going to perform the exercise during the actual working set. So that means during the time that I have 70% of my 1 rep max and above. So I act as if this bar has 315 pounds or more. And so I will practice my breathing, so that diaphragmatic breathing. So I'm taking that deep breath and exploding up, acting as if it's got all the weight that I'm going to be working with for today. That's the first set. So usually for most beginners, we're going to want you to see or to perform the warming set as a body weight set until you get used to lifting a bar. And then next will be a lighter weight set. That is your first, or the beginning of your first 3 to 4 sets that you'll be working with. So I want that to be, a relatively difficult weight, but not so difficult that you can't perform at least 12 reps. And then at the second, third, and fourth set, those are called working sets. And that at this point is when you are performing the lift. And while I'm addressing weight, I've noticed that there are some exercises that are being marked as maybe 5 RPE or 4 RPE. And I want you to think about when you're performing this exercise not to be worried about the weight if you do go up in weight. I know that numbers seem scary, especially when you've got heavy weight and you're holding it, or you've got it over your head, or maybe it's on your back. Don't be afraid. A good way to cue how your exercises should feel is taking the scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the most difficult. That's where the RPE scale comes into play. If that 10th, or if you get 8 reps out and you think you can do 2 more, and then that 10th rep is failure, that's about where I'm going to want you. But I'm not going to want you to be pushing so hard that you actually fail at the 8th rep. So think about that and assess while you're performing the exercise. Every day is not going to be the same, and every workout's not going to be the same. So with that, I'll leave you. Thank you. Have a good day.